Charles, can we please start with this reporting, learning that Trump's legal bills, he spent $100 million, most of it donor dollars.
Yes.
I am guessing there have to be at least some people who wrote checks who are not happy that those checks are out there paying his lawyers.
I would imagine so, Stephanie.
Can they fight this?
They can try, but generally speaking, this is more of a political problem than it is a legal problem. What I mean by that is he has apparently followed the guidelines about what he can spend money on. It's just the fact that the people who decided to donate to his campaign have been suckered. And they are now understanding that Donald Trump never intended to have a save the election and protect the election pact. He never intended to actually do the things that he was saying he was going to do as a candidate. He was speaking primarily as a defendant. But here's something to think about.
Sock it to us.
Regardless of how much money Donald Trump is spending on lawyers, if somehow he makes it back to $1,600 pen, it was more than worth it.
Damn. Well, he could also argue, we could laugh and say, I thought he was a rich guy, not paying his own bills. He would argue that makes him a smart rich guy. Why would he use his own money if legally he can use other people's? But McKay, he's currently struggling to fundraise, at least this time around. Now that it's public that all of these donor dollars are going to his legal bills, could it make it more difficult for him to raise money going forward?
I think that if you are somebody who is donating to the Trump campaign, you are going to reach a point where you want to see return on investment. You want to see where that money is going. And I think it's going to become more and more complicated to get those donors to keep ponying up when you have stories like you saw in the Associated Press this week showing that in key battleground states across the country, the Trump campaign has effectively no general election campaign apparatus. Joe Biden has hired 350 new staffers, opened 100 new offices across battleground states this month alone. The Trump campaign has done basically nothing. I think that if you're a Republican donor and you're considering whether to raise money for Donald Trump's campaign, you're going to have to start reading those stories and wondering, am I raising money just to keep paying this guy's legal fees, or am I raising money to win a general election? And if the Trump campaign can't make a compelling case to those donors, yeah, I think it's going to be harder to keep raising money.
Well, McKay, what about Republicans in some of these down ballot races? Should they be worried that there won't be any RNC money left for them after Trump takes it all to pay his lawyers?
Well, I think that you're going to see mounting discontent and increasingly public discontent if that is in fact the case. It's clear that there's been some behind the scenes blowback on this question because you see Lara Trump, Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, who is now co-chair of the RNC, kind of furiously backpedaling, saying the RNC isn't going to cover his legal bills after all. We're not going to do that. Every penny of every dollar is going to go to his campaign. That you don't see her go out and make comments like that unless you're in a situation where you were hearing privately, not just from donors, but from Republican officials, that they are extremely frustrated.
You mean sitting down with Garrett Haake isn't how Lara Trump likes to start every Wednesday morning? I'm shocked. Michael, let's talk about
That's
President
how I like to start my day.
Totally, me too.
Maybe not.
Let's talk about President Biden, because while Donald Trump is dealing with these legal bills, the president has been out there campaigning 18 days, 8 states. Tell us about it.
Well, Steph, as a political reporter, we're usually trying to outwork our competitors, get inside the campaign playbook, get the scoop of what the strategy really is. The Biden campaign, they put their cards on the table. They said these are the battleground states. And we're learning not just based on where the president's been this month, where he thinks he could compete. We're learning how he thinks he can compete. So, for instance, he goes to North Carolina. I was at the event yesterday talking about health care, abortion rights, the expansion of Medicaid in North Carolina. They think those are issues the president can run on and win. When he was in Nevada, he was talking about housing costs. We know the impact of the housing crisis there in 2008. The affordability crisis is still a big issue there. New Hampshire, he was talking about, again, lowering prices. So we're learning a lot about how the Biden team thinks they can win in November. And one of the things that's a point of contrast, during those same 18 days, Donald Trump was only holding one campaign event the entire time. And so we've talked a lot about, age as an issue in this campaign. The Biden campaign is wondering, hey, when is anybody going to notice that we're the only ones campaigning? The one who's running in the basement or the courtroom, as it were, is Donald Trump.
I do want to talk about President Biden and his messaging. We're not hearing him use the term Bidenomics anymore. There are still lots of great data points. There are lots of positive things about the economy. However, inflation looms. Is that the reason while he's going state to state? Is he hearing that from voters, and that's got him kind of changing his messaging?
When I talk to Democratic strategists, they say, listen, there is a good economic story to tell, but what they want to hear more from the president is empathy. He needs to understand that, yes, these trends all look good, the stock market is high, but Biden's never been somebody who puts his, economic value on what the Dow Jones says today. He wants to know what the middle class, what the person who grew up in a community like his in Scranton thinks. And so when you take the Biden campaign's Bidenomic strategy, they were thinking when it was originating, let's look at how successful Obamacare was. The Affordable Care Act, it was attacked as Obamacare. They turned that around and made it a success. They wanted to get ahead of what they thought Republicans were going to do, which is attack him on the economy when they saw things getting better. So maybe they've dialed away from the slogan, but that's not stopping the president from trying to do what he can in these events to talk specifically about the ways he thinks his economic wins are translating for voters. It still comes down to a gut feel, though, and that's something they need to work on.
Charles, let's talk about Donald Trump and his classified documents case. He was indicted over 9 months ago, right? It seems like Aileen Cannon is, tipping the scales for him every chance she possibly can get. Most people out there think there is no chance of a trial before the election. What do you think?
That's pretty wise. I mean, I think it is uncanny to consider how much outside help Donald Trump has had on all of his criminal court cases. This is
So there is a two-tier justice system,
unquestionably.
and he's in the good tier.
He's in the good tier. He's at the tippy top of the good tier. There's no question that this is not a complicated litigation. The Mar-a-Lago documents case is probably the most straightforward of all of his criminal indictments that he's facing. And so the fact that it has been as slow and we haven't seen much movement is clearly an indication that beyond what he's been saying in the public, beyond the maneuvers that his attorneys have been doing, and even beyond what Aileen Cannon has said, you are now seeing how this justice system actually works. The one thing I will point out is I do think that Aileen Cannon has gotten a bit gun shy because of how she's been treated by the 11th Circuit. And so she's not as quick to make any hasty decisions. Not that she was moving at rocket speed before.
She's not making any decisions.
Right.
Which is a gift to Trump.
Of course it is. But to answer your question, I do not see this getting off the ground before the end of the year. Certainly not before the election.
All right, different case. Let's talk about the hush money case here in New York, because less than 24 hours, Donald Trump was hit with a partial gag order. He is out there attacking 2 people tied to this case, but not mentioned in the gag order: the judge and the judge's daughter. Any possible consequences for Trump, or he's going to keep on trucking?
He's going to keep on trucking. It is a very difficult space for Judge Marchand to be in, because there's a technical conflict of interest by saying to him, I'm going to silence you regarding talking about me. Now, with respect to his safety, should he have the right to do that? Absolutely. But again, we're talking about a 2-tiered system of justice here. Stephanie, I could not be in court for a traffic ticket and talk about the judge the way that Donald Trump has without facing repercussions. And so it is important to point out and to illustrate how the notions of power and privilege continue to play a part in how people tiptoe around this man who has no regard for the rule of law.
Let's talk about another very powerful man who does have great regard for the rule of law, President Obama. New York Times is reporting that the former president is now working a lot more closely with the Biden team, not just on doing a potential appearance or a fundraiser, but actual strategy help for the president because of his grave concern that Trump could win this thing.
Yeah, President Obama is all in, according to aides, for President Biden's reelection. There's a lot at stake, including in some ways his legacy. I was told by a senior advisor to the former president today that he and his team, they're talking to the Biden team, if not every day, multiple times a day. And now a lot of people probably wonder, why am I in New York right now as a White House correspondent? It's because of what's happening tomorrow. There is this major fundraiser, not just Barack Obama, Bill Clinton joining Joe Biden. It's going to raise at least $15 million for the campaign. Money is a big way.
Here in New York City?
Here in New York City, right across the street, Radio City. So plan accordingly, because you know it's going to be a little bit of a zoo. But this is going to be a major event, bringing in a lot of money for the campaign. But what's also being helpful for the Biden team is the advice he's getting giving to the current president. I was told on Friday when he was at the White House, they were taping some content about the Affordable Care Act. He was talking about, listen, your State of the Union was great. It's gotten people fired up. Stay out on the road. Keep doing what you're doing. It's really connecting with voters and to, again, hit that empathy point, too. So these two men work so closely together. Of course, in the administration, there was a little bit of hurt feelings, let's just say, on the part of the president that he did not support the idea of him running in 2016. Of course, Biden decided not to run. But they are fully locked arms right now.
Is it going to be the position of the RNC in 2024 that the 2020 election was not fairly decided or that it was stolen somehow?
Well, I think we're past that. I think that's in the past. We learned a lot. Certainly, we took a lot of notes.
I'd like to know what was in those notes. Laura Trump there saying that the 2020 election is in the past. Perhaps she should tell her father-in-law that. Despite the RNC chair's shift in messaging, Donald Trump cannot resist talking about his 2020 election loss. This week, he even claimed, without any basis in fact or reality, that the 2024 election is going to be rigged too. But only if he loses, of course. For more, I would like to bring in my old friend, Axios political reporter Hans Nichols, and Amanda Carpenter, writer and editor for Project Democracy. She is also a former senior staffer to Republican Senators Jim DeMint and Ted Cruz. Hans, is anybody really going to buy this, especially when Trump spreads lies about the election every chance he can get?
Oh, Trump's voice is going to be the biggest in the room. I don't think any of us should think that Trump's not going to drown out everyone on this. What matters from sort of Laura Trump isn't necessarily what she's saying. What matters is the mechanics of what the RNC is doing. And if the RNC is doing what she's kind of hinting at throughout that interview that Garrett had, she's clearly hinting that they're going to go big on early voting. And that's really the true test. Look at what a politician does, not necessarily what they say. Trump may be saying that it's stolen and that, it was rigged. But if they are leaning into this idea of banking early votes and trusting mail by vote, which is something that didn't happen in 2020, that's a strong indication that the mechanics of this, and just on a technical basis, the RNC is proceeding as though the last election wasn't stolen, it wasn't rigged, and they're going to try to win by the rules that are out there.
Amanda, this shift is being called a dramatic shift in messaging, but I want to share more of the interview that she did with Garrett Haake. And to be clear, what I'm about to share, none of what she is saying is true. Watch this.
We had to learn a couple of hard lessons in 2020. Believe me, we are taking those. We are applying them all across this country in every single state, and we want to ensure that, indeed, every single legal vote is counted.
For fact's sake, every single legal vote was counted in 2020. There was no widespread voter fraud. Amanda, what is she talking about? And who's she trying to reach with this?
Listen, I think she's trying to play it both ways. Frankly, this is a very hard interview to watch. It's like I feel like she's just playing a big joke on us because we know the very things that Donald Trump is saying. Listen, she's technically, yes, the 2020 election was in the past. That is a true fact. But Donald Trump keeps the stolen election narrative alive at every rally. He talks about pardoning January 6 rioters. He is the one that clings to that. And the stolen election narrative is the basis for his retribution agenda that he promises in his second term. But for the facts of the RNC, yes, every halfway decent election official wants Republicans to go back to early voting. She's going to try to do that, while at the same time, they are very clearly screening to make sure that election deniers are going to the RNC. There was a story in the Washington Post this morning talking about how there is a loyalty or a litmus test for that. Their new employees are asked, do you believe the election is stolen? The reason she has that job is because Ronna McDaniel was ousted from the RNC because she didn't cling to the election integrity issues hard enough. And she was replaced. The person that Laura Trump brought into the RNC was a conspiracy theorist hype woman, Christina Bobb, that did all kinds of terrible things in Arizona to promote the cyber ninjas and all the rest that caused a lot of damage to election officials in that state. And so she can sit there and tell Garrett Haake, oh, we're going to do everything on the up and up. We're going to bank early votes. At the same time, her RNC is doing everything it can to keep the big election lies going. And so I just think it's very hard to take anything that she says with a straight face.
She's changing her messaging when she's talking to Garrett Haake, but they are certainly not changing what they're doing behind the scenes and on the ground. Hans, the Biden administration is changing some of their messaging, but not their work. Messaging around the economy. We haven't heard Bidenomics during this 8-state tour that the president just did over the last 18 days. What's your take on that?
Yeah, but he said it on Tuesday. So my colleague Alex Thompson and I had noticed this, that the president had gone totally radio silent on Bidenomics. And then it was on Tuesday that he said it again. He said it for the first time in 2 months in North Carolina. So we had to tweak our lead a little bit. But the story holds. And it's even truer when you look at congressional Democrats. There was a big pickup on using Bidenomics over the summer when the president finally embraced it. And the basic idea here, Stephanie, for your viewers, is to do for Bidenomics what Barack Obama did for Obamacare. And that is to take a liability, take something that's toxic, and turn it into a political asset. And the White House really pressed on this over the summer. And then slowly they got some pushback from Democrats who didn't think it was a great idea. And it started tapering off and it went silent. The bigger drop off, yes, there's a big drop off from what the president is in his verbiage. And remember, presidential speeches, a lot of effort and time go into them. Yes, President Biden speaks off the cuff on occasion, but what the president says matter. And they do think about this quite critically. On the congressional side, when you just look at all the press releases, Quorum studies this, all their social media posting, it has dropped off a cliff. And that tells us something, and that is that, yes, the economy has improved. Consumer confidence is up. Consumer sentiment is up a little bit higher. We'll get the final reading at the end of the month. You and I always like to do our little Bloomberg thing here. That's the one thing, the one data point that the White House is really looking at. But it's flatlined a little bit. So, yes, you have a healthy economy, but consumers aren't quite feeling it the way the White House wants them to. And they appear to be shifting gears a little bit.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.